Hey guys, this is Miko here. I'm back with another video. This is going to be an updated build guide on my Blunderbuss Void Gauntlet setup, which I use on most servers as a Daddy Point player with a lot of success. This is I'd say a more difficult build than a typical build to play. It breaks some of the traditional rules where you have to pair a weapon with an Ice Gauntlet for survivability on point if you're not a melee player. The reason why I'm able to break those rules is because I have so many forms of slowing people down and crowd control manipulation that I'm able to stay alive despite not having a lot of survivability built into the kit. This build is, I found it best to run it in heavy with between 200 to 300 con, depending on what ult you're going for. If you're going for vines, I think 300 con is a little bit better. If you're going for bio, I think 250 int's a little bit better. That's because 250 int actually extends the duration of bio to 11 seconds versus 8 seconds, and it also extends the duration of all your dots, which inherently just makes it have more value. So yeah, that's the main reason with that. And then going into like abilities I'm taking in terms of how I'm able to live. So net shot, when you have this apparatus, the big thing about apparatus is if you in New World, the initial perk is affected by freedom, but the actual bonus trees that you use are not affected by freedom, meaning this apparatus is guaranteed to be a 7-second slow versus a 3-second slow, and freedom's not affected by that since the freedom would only apply to the space ability, but then that just gets overridden by the apparatus perk, because this apparatus perk doesn't like add an additional 7 seconds, and it sets the duration to 7 seconds, which means it's not affected by freedom whatsoever, which inherently just makes Blunderbuss very, very strong, and that's one of the big reasons why I go for this blast shot tree over the Azoth Shrapnel line, is because this apparatus I think is super underrated and is one of, if not my favorite perks on the blunderbuss right now. The tree is pure defensive perks. I don't take any damage perks whatsoever. I am playing as a defensive build. I think that there is some aspect that deep load is like a really good perk that you could have with this build, and then you can cut something out like bite back or future endeavors would be the perk I'd go for with deep load, but I don't tend to prio the damage at all. I just look for clump potential, and I'm using all these abilities just to prio my survivability as much as possible. And the other forms that help you escape, so this is a really easy way to help escape clumps. Blast shot actually puts a haste on the ground, so I can kind of play around in that sometimes, and that will let me kite melees along with jumping on certain spots. So that's a really good thing for your army as a whole, as well as for you. The Oblivion just increases your stam generation, so I'm able to live better versus multiple people on me. And, and then Scream's defensive, and if someone is hit with a dot, and I throw an orb at them, that's going to put a slow on the target. So that's going to be another way to basically make it so that you can create more distance. That is the slowing orb perk that not a ton of people play for. Uh, it's also noteworthy that a normal dot with a rune glass gem will be enough to proc that slowing orb, which is a kind of a big buff compared to how it used to have to be played. So basically every single perk is able to help me live. And even the grenades give you haste when they land. So now I have 20% haste. If that gives me a crit, then that's gonna proc my keen speed, and then I get 40% haste. So one thing I try to do a lot is I try to use my double down with the plague splitting grenade as an opener. So I'll throw those in, I'll get the haste, and then I'll kind of move up, and then I'll look for a scream and to drop into my cooldowns, and then I'll kind of maneuver like this, and then at a certain point I'll blast shots to have the ability to move back and forth a little bit faster, and then when I have no abilities, I'm defaulting to my Void Gauntlet. So that's like my typical opener I look for. And then also you can drop the nades to escape. So basically the idea behind this build is I'm on Void Gauntlet unless I am under 50% HP. If I get to under 50% HP or I get near that threshold where there's people on me, I will swap to the Blunderbuss. Void Gauntlet does have inherent Fortify built in it with the Scream, which is a little bit noteworthy, but it's pretty easy to be stripped versus the Blunderbuss's Fortify is more constantly replenishing, so it feels a little bit safer. And then the other big gambit I play for is I go for a last chance uh, Purify play all the time. So I get stripped of all my debuffs, and then I get 50% Fortify, and then I can pop pots for free, and I can do that once every 90 seconds, which seems like it's a long time, but it doesn't feel that long when you actually play this build, and it saves you a decent amount of the time. So that's like my kind of mini Ice Gauntlet aspect built into it, if you will. I still think stamina recovery is probably a little bit better, and divine is kind of interesting, but I think stamina recovery is like the ideal thing to have here, but I just have not been able to get a ring like that or an amulet like that. Uh, ring could be a little bit better, but I'll go into those things in a second. I just wanted to talk about like how I'm actually like living. So basically everything is on my every single ability in my kit is either providing a slow or a haste to me, and I can manipulate those to stay alive in clumps by positioning myself a little bit better. That's the base idea behind this build. This is not a build that you want to be in the center of a clump in my opinion, but you want to be a little bit outside of the clump. I like to think it more of like a either like a bard setup or just like a really really passive void gauntlet sort of thing, even though you're on point and is heavy. Like you're kind of hiding on point and you're providing a lot of natural buffs to your army and debuffs to the enemy team. Like I give my army haste, I put 25% disease on them, I put another 30% disease on them, and then it's also with the bile that's going to apply the slow and it's going to provide the exhaust, which is a really big impact. If you have people in your backline that aren't your healers, you hit them with a net shot, and then they're slowed for 7 seconds for 50% slow, which basically means that they have to pop a cleansing, and that's like a really easy way to force a cleanse. If I had exhaustive net, that would be even better, but have not been able to find a piece. I would replace one of these refreshing orbs with exhaustive net shot, and I'd also consider running diminishing orb because it actually gets a decent amount of value on point, especially with shirking for it not being able to be repopped every 6 seconds to the inherent cooldown that's on it. That's got updated a few patches ago. The freedom I pry over shirking fort mostly because of ping issues. But it actually feels really good on point. And then the vines meta was ideal. Now I don't know if it's ideal, but it still feels really good to me because I play most of my characters on like 80 to 120 ping on west, and then on east I am typically 120 to 180 ping depending on the time of day. Like even now it's jumping up to 300. Uh, it's a little bit on my internet side and a little bit on server side, but yeah. Going into so I set this all up on New World Buddy too, because it's just a cleaner looking site to look at. So the base. Let me go back to here and take off the. Do I have the actual one? Okay. Well, this actual slash is a little messed up because I put oak on bar. I'd go between oak and gemstone depending on the circumstance. Versus the best companies, I tend to run oak. Versus companies that slot more blunderbusses and bows and have worse melees on point, I tend to slot gem. But versus people like Supple who tend to slot more melees and their other builds have a little bit less impact on me, those guys, I will specifically slot oak to deal with the melees. Um, but yeah, I've run cleanse and health pots on bar, nothing surprising there. These are my consumes. They're all helpful. Even the energizing hearty meal that will allow me to basically not have to worry about my int ever. It's less necessary if you get above the 200 int threshold, but it still feels nice to me, especially because I don't take any perks on my Void Gauntlet that reduce the mana cost, like Radiant Efficiency, so that works pretty well. And yeah, overall there's a decent amount of health in there. And yeah, 5-piece Freedom, 5-piece Resil, 5-piece Refreshing Ward, run, and then I'll get into the specific pieces in a second, but I try to slot a little bit towards the fire resistance, just because blunderbusses are the most scary thing. I think I could drop one more opal for another fire, to be honest. Fire is like the only thing that's kind of scary from the elemental side to me right now. The gravels, even though people are stacking void damage, they're very easy to dodge. So that's not super concerning for the most part for me. And yeah, getting into tree, kind of already talked about this. I take every defensive perk. I don't rely on any of the offensive perks. I again play it as like a very support-oriented build, even though I have 250 int. I run the 250 int not because I want to deal more damage, but because I want my dots to last longer and I want my bile to last longer. I have even considered like running burning, instead of like one of these other perks, but I think infected's a little bit better. And then the only one I'm like have considered dropping is hardy, weirdly, because this future endeavors will get me above that 100 threshold, as well as Oblivion, so I don't think the Hardy is necessarily necessary. So if there was an infected burning keen awareness ring, I would definitely try it out. The burning would just increase the duration of the bombs, which would get me more ult charge basically. This is like a build I'm trying to build my ult as fast as possible, but I'm not running the ice pylon tree, so it's not going to be as fast as other builds, but it's still going to be really, really fast. It's surprising how fast you get ult charge from Oblivion when you just drop it and there's like 10 people around you. You get the ult really, really fast from that, as well as the Void Gauntlet inherently has a lot of dots on it, which makes it get ult very, very quickly. If I had Keenly Jagged, I'd probably prio that over my current weapons too, but yeah, this is the blunderbuss tree. Again, I mainly go for the blast shot just for the apparatus. I think apparatus is like one of the best perks in the game because it overrides the freedom, because freedom's not actually affected by things later on in the tree, but is affected will like ward against the initial perk. So if you go apparatus on the blunderbuss, then there's basically no counter to the 7-second slow without popping a cleanse pot, which just kills so many people. It's actually ridiculous. uh, that probably should not be in the game, but that's a mechanic right now. And the only easy way to get to apparatus is by taking blast shot. You can't get it if you go the normal tree where people get to double down and they only run the grenades on right tree. So that's a little bit noteworthy as well. And that's not the main reason why I initially went for blast shot, but then blast shot also just inherently feels pretty good just for the haste alone. I'd say that the rend on it is not impactful. The knockback is impactful, but the actual haste itself is the one of the best parts about the blast shot ability, and that's what I mostly play it for. This is a standard Void Gauntlet tree. Some people swap this Forsaken Pack perk for Radiant Efficiency or for Thirst. I think this is just better, but it's a little bit of preference on that spot, I guess. I've also seen Void Collar get swapped. There is also like a right side tree that people go for a Glimpse of the Void. Seems really inconsistent. I don't see many people run it anymore because you have to stay on your Void Gauntlet in order to get that double CDR. But if you have that, then you can go Scream into Scream, which is like kind of cool. Getting into gear, again, getting up from here, a lot of Brazil, a lot of freedom, a lot of refreshing ward. I prior freedom because I am on point and I am on ping and have inconsistent internet, and it helps me live better than checking for it. So that's my base setup. The refreshing ward also kind of counters blunderbusses, which are more natural to be on point. But the main reason why I run the refreshing ward is because the gear is a little bit cheaper, and that was what was previously run. It is helpful though at times compared to refreshing because I can go net shot into net shot into net shot into net shot, and that has happened before. If blunderbusses are chasing you, you just keep net shotting. It's kind of funny. And every one of those people that you hit gets a 50% slow. This reduces the cooldown on that shot. The barb netting will actually give you ult charge, so all that's really good. And this also gets extended by 250 int, which is nice. So yeah, that's the base setup. The main thing that I would be looking to change is my actual chest, which has it's a good chest, but it has strength. I'm like kind of curious at this point. If I didn't have that chest, I would consider going and trying 300 int, and I'd consider trying 250 con. But because I have that chest at this point, I'm just kind of diminishing returns mindset, and I can't get to another threshold with these perks, so I just dumped everything into strength and optimized that for damage, even though the rest of my build is optimized for utility. The blunderbuss is the other main thing I could improve on with this. The main thing is it has dex, but it has the perks I wanted, so that's nice. And those blunderbusses are naturally a little bit rare. The other interesting part is I actually okay, this is the wrong gem. In my blunderbuss, I run an arcane gem now because I have chain arcane, so it has to be arcane. But this actually does more damage than the opal does when you get to a 250 int threshold. So it just makes more sense to run that, even if the opal is procced. So that's why I run that. But yeah, I run Fire Ward because blunderbusses tend to put damage on the point. All this other split stuff is like fairly standard. It's just 10-10 with a 1 Fire Ward. I could maybe try 2 Fire Ward, but I like the 20% slash. I don't go 25% slash on this account. If I was versus like someone like Supple, I would consider going 25% slash just because it's a lot more melees, but typically it is at 20%. And then I run Okam Bar, which is my main counter to that setup. So yeah, Teardrop very good. A lot of people don't like regenerating for some reason, but I think regenerating is like actually insane. Like it does way more than I think people think it does. It's you just heal the entire time. It counters a lot of dots that are inherent in the game, so that feels really really good to me. The only con I feel to this setup right now is there's a lot of times where I need heals where I don't want to be needing heals. I want my bruisers to be able to get the heals, but inherently by not having the ice gauntlet, I get a little bit less tanky. So there are times where I need single target heals or I'm able to live, but it feels like the healer has to prio me at the same time that prio melees at times, which is why I try to play so safe and why I try to play more passive in general. But yeah, that's the only con I've found so far. Keen speed I run just to be able to kite people a little bit better. Also helps me get in with that initial nade play, which normally crits, and then I can set up myself for a really easy Void Gauntlet scream, because that gives me the haste, which allows me to get in to get the scream off. And then from there I do all my abilities, and then I work my way out. I like Chain a lot because it builds the ult charge a little bit faster. Unlike Attunement doesn't help you build ult charge, which is why I run Chain and why I would recommend Chain if you're in heavy. Plague Splitting Grenade feels pretty good on weapon. This doesn't show the right thing uh, on the site, but yeah, it hits for 23% right now. It could be 24 if I get that up a little bit higher gear score, which I'm working on, but it's not a gen week, so I'm not doing PvE. Void Gauntlet, this is my favorite setup so far in the game. There are a couple like interesting aspects of Void Gauntlet that I'm yet to try. There's an argument to drop Keen. The main reason why you would consider dropping Keen on a Void Gauntlet is these perks that were on the debuffs are actually capped now. And I believe, or where's the one? Is it this one? No. No, it's this one. Refreshing Precision is like the main reason why you run Keen on every piece with the Void Gauntlet, because this will give you a lot of CDR. It is noteworthy that there's a limit on it now, but also the actual orb itself counts as two different abilities, basically. Uh, the actual orb coming out is an ability, and when you detonate it is a different ability, so that's like two different opportunities for it to crit, which is why I think Keen is probably better, but I think there is an aspect that the actual, what do you call it, Keenly Jagged would be kind of interesting to try out. I think it might be a little bit better than a chain, but I am like one of the Void Gauntlet players that goes for a lot of eat in the auto, eat in the auto. So this just works out for me. Um, so that would be kind of interesting. And then I run Bile. I think Bile's insane. I've made a lot of videos on it, but yeah, it just there are times where you throw the Bile out and you just see the entire clump die. You have to time it right, but it's really easy to lob it, and it feels easier to get value with that than it does with vines at the moment. Vines, a lot of the time you get like really big vines, and then no one's there to follow up, or you do it with someone's there to follow up, but the neighbors rest a pot because they have people on them and they're not able to follow up. There are just like so many conditionals of the vines that I find it a little bit harder to get value off of as a Deady Point player, and think Bile makes more sense for the role. I've also seen some people run Stoneform, and I think that also would work well with this role. And it would help you set up for the Void Gauntlet abilities a little bit better. But in my opinion, the Bile is just too good to not be running. So yeah, that's the base idea behind the setup. Let me know if you guys have any questions, but the main idea, I mean, you guys have seen all the videos at this point, but you play for your net shot and your apparatus to get a lot of value, and then all your other things are just trying to build ult to get to this Bile Bomb, and I tend to play it very, very passively compared to a lot of people I've seen play this build. But by playing it passively, I'm able to live without the Ice Gauntlet, and if people get on me, then I have enough crowd control to be able to shut them down and make them regret being on me. So it's kind of a people don't want to be on you because if they get on you, they get solo screamed in the solo net shot, and they just don't have a good time generally. And then the blast shot's also really easy to get value with. Some tips with the blast shot. Bruisers tend to go for a Gravel into Shockwave into Maelstrom combo, and during that actual Maelstrom itself, it's really easy to get the blast shot off, and then that will deny them because Maelstrom does not have grit on it. So that's a really easy way to get a lot of value. You just knock people out of the Maelstrom, prevents a lot of the damage. You could also prevent people, you can knock people during the Gravel animation because that's a little bit longer. And that's a really fun way to get value. And then you could also kind of harass people that are cleanse potting, and then you can blow you can kind of blast shot people that are IGVGs back into clumps who just escape clumps with all their stam gone. That's another easy way to get value. But the blast shot does knock a lot of people over. It's a lot. It launches people a lot less far than clear out. It tends to get a lot more value than clear out. I don't think it's really a meme, but some people don't love it. I think it's really, really effective, and I think most people tend to agree with that. But if you launch someone into an ice shower, they don't go any further. If you launch someone into another person's body, they'll just stop. It tends to feel a lot better. But the main reason why I'm running blast shot's not for the blast shot itself. It's to get to this apparatus perk because I think this is the best perk on Blunderbuss. And if I try to run a different tree to get to the apparatus perk, like this would be your normal Blunderbuss tree. Uh, it's just not possible unless I cut off if I cut off deep load and ramp, and at that point, it just does not feel worth it if I'm going for a damage tree and I have to cut deep load and ramp. So it's either you have to cut double down, which no one really wants to cut double down. uh, like if you were to do something like this, then you can do it, but then you're going unload, and unload's just a lot worse than double down, so it doesn't make a lot of sense, which is why I tend to go for the other tree that I showed before. So, yeah. Uh, I will see you guys in the next video. That's my Blunderbuss Void Gauntlet setup, and I think that it's you could run it in other builds. You could run it in medium. You could run it in light, but it feels best in heavy to me because you're able just to deal with people that get on you a little bit better. And inherently, you don't really need to move a lot. You just need to control zone with this, and it's really good at controlling zones. And I will see you guys in the next video.